Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Jovette. On this channel, what we do is to make every skill very easy and simple for you. We not only teach you how to perform these skills, we simplify it to your understanding. I mean, what more can you ask for? Or where else can you be if not here? Today, what we have for you is range of motion. Range of motion is an exercise to put the joint through its full arc of motion. What we mean is, this is the exercise we perform, caregivers perform on residents or patients. So we have two types of range of motion: active range of motion and passive range of motion. The difference between the two is that while passive range of motion, or PROM for short, is the exercise caregivers perform on residents without the resident actively participating. So the caregiver does everything. Active range of motion, on the other hand, is the exercise the caregiver perform on the resident with the resident's active participation. So the resident is involved in the exercise. The resident actively participates, not only the caregiver doing everything. So that is just the difference between the two. That being said, if you are interested to see how it is done, let us dive right into the video. One more thing, if you find this video helpful at the end of the day, you know what to do? Subscribe, like, comment down below. Let us know if you have any questions, or if there is any particular video or videos you would love to see from us. Leave it in the comment section. We will do well to answer your questions. I mean, that is why we are here. We're here to serve you and better. So, also, do not forget to turn your notification on. That way you will never miss any video from us again. Always look out for videos coming from us, and you will never regret it. So I already washed my hands. Hi, my name is Jovette. I'm going to be your CNA for today. Can I take a look at your wrist? Oh, Miss Jones, how are you doing today? Good. Today I'm going to help you perform some exercises. Is that okay by you? Okay. So I'm going to start by taking the core light off the bed. I will put the side raise up on this side, and I also go to the other side to put the side raise up. Provide privacy. Now I'm going to bring the bed up to my walking height. Miss Jones, I hope you're doing okay. Good. Okay. So that is about how far the bed can go. For you to really understand how range of motion is done, we're going to section the body into different parts. So we have the upper extremities and the lower extremities. The upper extremities are the upper part of the body, and it involves the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, the thumb, and the fingers. That is the upper part of the body, the upper extremities. So when we're talking about the lower extremities, it starts with the hip, then we have the knee, we have the ankle, and we have the toes. That being said, we need to know how many exercises do we perform on each part of this body. That is basic. That will help you, especially if you are testing, to know when you're done with a particular part of the body before you proceed to the next part of the body, so that you don't miss any step. Okay, so let's see how many exercises each of the body parts have. So the shoulder has 2 exercises, the elbow has 2 exercises, the wrist has 2 exercises, the thumb has 3 exercises. Remember, the thumb is different from the finger when we're doing range of motion. Okay. The fingers has 2 exercises, and the lower extremities, we have the hip has 2 exercises. The knee can only move in one direction, it has 1 exercise. The ankle has 2 exercises, and the toes have 2 exercises. That is to say, all the body parts have 2 exercises, except the knee that has 1 and the thumb that has 3. That being said, let us now put the names assigned to each of these body parts now. So are we ready? Let's go with the shoulder first. 2 exercises. So the way, the placement of your hand also matters. So you're going to support the joints. Then we go flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. So you need to know that each part of the body, you have to repeat the exercise 3 times. So each exercise is meant to be repeated 3 times. Okay, that doesn't mean you're doing 3 different exercises. One exercise, you repeat it 3 times before you proceed to the next exercise for that particular part of the body, if there are 2. Okay, so let's go. Flexion, extension. Watch my hand. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension. 3 times I did this same exercise for the shoulder. So the next exercise for the shoulder is abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction. Like you're taking the hand away, the arm away from the body. Remember, it's just like abducting someone away from the family. You're taking that person away from the family, abduction. So when you're doing AB, abduction, you're taking the arm away from the body. So anytime you forget, remember that. Adduction, like you're adding it back to the body. Anytime you forget, it's just like addition, adding it back to the body, adduction. All right? Okay, so let's see the exercise for the elbow. Elbow has 2. So we're going to go flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. So now we're going to do the second exercise for the elbow, which is you're going to face the palms up, supination, pronation, palms down for pronation. Supination, palms up, pronation, palms down. Supination, pronation, supination, pronation, supination, pronation. Okay, so for the fingers, you're gonna go flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension, adduction, 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 abduction, 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 abduction. So when you're moving the fingers away from the thumb, it's abduction, AB. When you're moving the fingers towards the thumb, is adduction, adding. Adduction, 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 adduction. Abduction, 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 abduction. All right? Supination, pronation. Supination, pronation. So supination, you're facing the palm upwards, and pronation, you're facing it downwards. Okay? So we are done with the elbow. Now we're going to proceed to the wrist. The wrist has two exercises. So we have dorsiflexion, flexion, dorsiflexion, flexion, dorsiflexion, flexion, dorsiflexion, flexion. So that's one exercise for the wrist. So the second exercise for the wrist is radial flexion, ulnar flexion, radial flexion, ulnar flexion, radial flexion, ulnar flexion. So radial flexion, when you are moving the wrist towards the thumb side, remember we take the radial pulse on this side. That will remind you. So radial flexion, we're moving this wrist towards the radial side, and ulnar flexion towards the pinky side, the small finger. So ulnar flexion, radial flexion, ulnar flexion, radial flexion. So we are done with the wrist. Now we're going to proceed with range of motion of the thumb. So the thumb has three. So we're going to do flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension, adduction, AD, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction. So when you're taking it away from the thumb, away from the rest of the fingers, it's called abduction. When you're adding it back to the rest of the fingers, it's called adduction. So now we are left with one more exercise for the thumb, and that is thumb opposition. The thumb is opposing all the fingers. So now is the time for us to exercise the thumb. So thumb opposition, thumb opposition, thumb opposition, thumb opposition. So we're going to repeat it 3 times. Thumb opposition, thumb opposition, thumb opposition, thumb opposition. Thumb opposition, thumb opposition, thumb opposition, thumb opposition. And we are done with the thumb. Now we're going to proceed to the fingers. The finger has 2 exercises, and we're going to go flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. And the second exercise for the fingers is abduction, 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 adduction, 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 abduction, away from the thumb now, abduction, abduction, abduction. When we are bringing it back towards the thumb, adduction, 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 adduction. Hope we understand this part. So we're going to move on to the lower part of the body, starting with the hip. Now we're going to proceed with the hip. So the first exercise for the hip, we have 2 exercises for the hip. Abduction, adduction, abduction, away, adduction, abduction, adduction. Okay, we have the second exercise for the hip, and that is internal rotation. Rotate it to inward. External rotation, internal rotation, internal rotation, external rotation. So we are done with exercise for the hip. So now we're going to move to the knee. The knee has just 1 exercise. So we're gonna go flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension, and we are done with the knee. So for the ankle, we have 2 exercises, remember? So we're gonna go dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, like you're planting your foot down. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. That is one exercise for the ankle. The second one is supination, pronation. Supination, pronation. So supination, like we're trying to turn this part of the foot upwards, inward like this, and pronation is like this. Supination, pronation. Supination, pronation. And we are done with exercise for the ankle. Now we're going to proceed for the toes. So the toes have 2 exercises: flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. Just the same thing we did with the fingers. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension. Now, the second exercise for the toes is abduction, 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 abduction. Abduction, remember, AB, away. This is our point of reference. So when you're moving the rest of them away from the big toe, it's called abduction. Abduction, abduction, abduction. Remember the word when you forget, when you're abducting. Abduction, away, abduction, abduction, abduction. When you're adding it back when you're moving them back towards the big toe, it's called adduction, AD, like addition. Adduction, adduction, adduction. Adduction, 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 adduction. So when you're moving them away from the big toe, it's called what? Let me see if we are learning. AB, abduction, 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 abduction. When you're moving them back towards the big toe, it's called what? AD, adduction, 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 adduction. And that is all you need to do. All you now need to do is to make the resident safe before leaving the room. And when you get out of the room, make sure you wash your hands, you note, you record, and always report to the nurse. Till I come your way again, it's bye for now.